You're watching Euronews now. I'm Takumbo Salako with your top stories. A day after getting its EU candidacy status approved, Ukraine is facing a significant defeat on the battleground as it orders its troops to leave the strategic eastern city of Severodonetsk. International aid is beginning to arrive in remote parts of Afghanistan hit by the devastating earthquake. Also in the programme, there's more evidence of the divided states as the US Supreme Court backs the right to bear arms while the Senate votes to toughen federal gun laws.
It's done. The European Union has granted candidate status to Ukraine, paving the way for the usually long process of joining the bloc. It's a decision that EU leaders have called a historical moment, and it's also a strong message of support to Kyiv, 4 months after Russia invaded the country.
The message which is being sent very clearly today is a very strong one, consistent with what our Europe has been able to do since the first day of the conflict, to react in a rapid, historic and united manner, through sanctions 2 days later, 6 times by macroeconomic, military, financial support for Ukraine, and now by this political gesture.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky immediately reacted to the news.
This is our victory. We have waited for it for 120 days and for 30 years. We will beat the enemy and will rest. Or probably, first we will rebuild Ukraine and then rest.
The decision was taken at the summit of government heads of state in Brussels. They also granted candidacy status to Moldova, another former Soviet state that borders Ukraine and that could easily be destabilized. It fears such a situation. Since Russia invaded, the process has moved at a record speed. Now both countries will have to work hard to introduce necessary reforms before starting the accession negotiations.
Of course, the countries all have to do homework before moving to the next stage of the accession process. But I am convinced that they will all move as swiftly as possible and work as hard as possible to implement the necessary reforms.
Fighting corruption and improving rule of law are two of the pending issues, and then there's no guarantee of success. Another country, Georgia, will have to wait longer and work harder before being allowed to apply.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent in Brussels, Maeve McMahon, who's been following this historic summit. Maeve, good to see you there. Celebratory scenes and warm words in public, but were those sentiments shared away from the camera? Or can Ukraine now expect its application to be fast-tracked even further?
Well, that's a very good question. I feel that last night we saw heads of state and government smile and extend very warm, supportive messages of support to Ukraine, congratulating them and also Moldova on what yesterday they were calling a historic step. Because we've never seen this in the history of the European Union. A country apply for membership and just within 3 or 4 months already have that approved, sealed and dealed by the 27 heads of state and government. But of course, you know, and the reality is it will be a long path ahead to one day seeing a Ukrainian head of state sitting here around that council table discussing various issues. It will be a long road ahead because accession talks won't even start yet, Tokes. We still haven't got a date or a timeline for them because there's a lot of hurdles that Ukraine and Moldova have to jump before those talks can even begin. And then the work on those 35 chapters, the so-called Copenhagen criteria that was founded back at a summit in 1993 in Copenhagen, criteria in order for members to join the bloc, that will also have to be finalised. That can take a long time. So yeah, we don't know when this really will become a reality, but for now, people like Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, and Charles Michel, the Council President, looking very satisfied with their personal efforts that they've put as well into trying to make sure that the rest of the bloc signed off on what they wanted, which was Ukraine officially becoming a candidate for EU membership.
Well, it's undeniably a huge moment, and the summit continues today with more talks, perhaps more sobering discussions, though, on the gloomy economic forecast which everyone's looking at right now, the cost of living soaring. What are leaders going to be looking at, and what can they do?
Well, first of all, Tokes, you're absolutely right. The mood today will be grim. It will be a stark contrast to the euphoria of last night with those messages of support for Ukraine. Today, the focus will be on inflation, the cost of living crisis, the impact of the COVID pandemic, and also the sanctions, the war in Ukraine. That's what it's having here on the continent of Europe. Heads of state and government will be joined by Christine Lagarde from the European Central Bank, as well as Pascal Donoghue, the head of the Eurogroup. They'll be coming with the facts and the figures, the grim reality of the state of the European economy today. And of course, Christine Lagarde can't just hike or spike up interest rates just yet, because the European economy, it's just not robust enough compared to the United States, for example. Some countries in the north of Europe, they could handle higher interest rates, but other countries in the south, well, it would be just a disaster for them. So we're really going to see today leaders in crisis mode as they figure out how to make sure that the pain and the cost of all this is not too high for European citizens, because of course they're worried as well of the backlash that all this will have, because what they're trying to say here in Brussels is that the EU is not responsible for the Russian aggression and for the sanctions that have been implemented, but of course it's Putin's war and the aggressor.
Ukrainian forces defending the eastern Ukrainian city of Severodonetsk have been ordered to retreat after a week staving off the Russian advance on the city. The towns of Loskativka and Ry-Oleksandrivka have also fallen, and the regional governor of the eastern Donetsk region said yesterday that no town is safe for residents. For some, village supply lines could be cut at any moment, and volunteers are working to evacuate those residents who haven't already fled. But some refuse to leave, saying they would rather be united with the Russians. At the same time, Ukraine says it is recording between 200 to 300 war crimes committed by Russian forces on its territory each day.
National police investigators have instituted more than 19,000 criminal proceedings since the beginning of the military aggression on the facts of crimes committed on the territory of Ukraine by Russia's armed forces and their accomplices, and other criminal offences related to the martial law.
Declassified US intelligence documents say that the Russian Navy has been given orders to lay mines at the ports of Odessa and Kharkiv, and have already mined the Dnieper River as part of an ongoing blockade on Ukrainian grain exports. Aid is beginning to trickle into Afghanistan. Wednesday's deadly earthquake has wreaked havoc on the war-torn country, already grappling with a humanitarian crisis. Military helicopters and vehicle convoys are on a mission to reach decimated villages, all in desperate need of provisions. It's a disaster the UN Security Council cannot ignore.
Search and rescue operations remain ongoing, and it is expected that the number of casualties will further increase over the coming days, along with the number of the affected communities.
Germany has promised medical aid to the people of Afghanistan. The Foreign Minister says at times like this, the only thing that counts is humanity.
We are planning to further increase the funding for them, and will provide more aid in the coming days, not through the Taliban, but with our partners in aid agencies like UNICEF and WHO, who could reach people directly on the ground. Even though other crises have greater media attention, we haven't forgotten the people of Afghanistan, and we know about our special responsibility.
The country's official news agency says an estimated 1,500 people were injured in the magnitude 6 earthquake. UN agencies and charities have provided essential supplies to the hardest hit areas. However, millions of people in Afghanistan are already on the brink of starvation. The economy and health system have both crumbled since the Taliban retook power last August.
Still lots more for you to come in the programme after this break. We'll be back in a few moments.